Hey everybody, welcome back. My name's Kyle Beckman and this is Flight to Financial Freedom. Why a flight? Because it's faster, more direct, and a heck of a lot more fun. I should know, I spent 20 years in the Air Force as a fighter pilot, and the last 13 of those as an instructor pilot at the world's best flight training program, United States Air Force Pilot Training. I combine my experience as an instructor with the money skills and knowledge I learned on my journey to reaching financial freedom at age 43. I use that combination to pursue my new life passion, helping guide you on your flight path to your financial goals. If you want more information on my definition of financial freedom or the simple formula that I use to define financial freedom, check out my last video in the description or up here. I'm excited today to teach you what I believe to be the most important lesson in all of investing. And the good news is, it's not complicated. It's really simple. In fact, it's so simple that I learned it in second grade. If that sounds exciting to you, get ready for takeoff. Okay, so what's the most important lesson of investing that I'm going to teach you about today? Well, I'd like to teach you with the same example that my second grade teacher, Mr. Kinnaman, used to teach us. So Mr. Kinnaman, if you're out there, thank you so much for teaching me this lesson, and now I'm passing it on. Here's the example. Your rich neighbor offers you a 1-year contract to mow his yard each week. He offers 2 compensation choices. Number 1, $20,000 weekly. Number 2, he'll pay you 1 penny the first week, but it will double each week. Now remember, this is a 1-year contract, so both of you are obligated to fulfill the obligations of the contract. You have to mow every week for the entire year, and he has to pay you for the entire year. So of those 2 compensation choices, which one would you choose? Now think about it for a little bit. Maybe do some math in your head, whatever it takes for you to come up with the best choice between these 2 compensation choices. Pause the video if you have to. All right, did everybody make a choice? Now let's find out which one is correct. I basically ran all these numbers through Excel, put them in a spreadsheet, and then I put these onto this slide that you see now before you. So those of you who chose the $20,000 a week option, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. After 13 weeks, you have $260,000. Not too shabby for just mowing a lawn. Those of you who chose the 1 cent option, not feeling so good right now. You've only made $81.91. Not too great, but we're not there yet. Here on slide 2, you can see the numbers have changed considerably. In week 26, exactly halfway through the year, the 1 cent doubled option has now surpassed the $20,000 a week option. The $20,000 a week option has made $520,000, $500,000. Pretty good, but not as good as $671,000 for the 1 cent doubling option. So already now at week 26, we're better off with that option. So if you chose that, then I award you 100 YouTube points, and you can gloat all you want in the comment section. But before you get too excited, I'm going to ask you another question. What will the 1 cent doubled option equal at the conclusion of an entire year? So what do you think $671,000 at week 26 is going to be at the conclusion of week 52? So once again, think about it, put your math hat on, pause the video if you need to, or just make a wild guess. What do you think the answer is going to be? Okay, hopefully you have an answer now and you've come up with a decision. Let's take a look and see whether you're right. In this next slide, I basically show you the entire spreadsheet, just so you can follow along with all the numbers and prove that I'm not making this stuff up. If you can read it all, You're either on a giant screen or your eyes pass the pilot test. And now we can see the final answer. If you look at the very bottom of the 1 cent doubling chart, can you make out that number? If you couldn't, maybe you can make it out now. That number is 45,35,996,273,705. That's not pennies, by the way. That's dollars. So at the conclusion of a year, if you chose to be paid for your compensation 1 cent the first week, with that doubled every week for the entire year, at the conclusion of that year, you would have made $45 trillion plus dollars. Now, I've given you an incredibly important tool now. So if you wanted, you can make $45 trillion off of your neighbor now. Or maybe you want to renegotiate your contract with your boss, or if you're a kid, with your parents or the next door neighbor for mowing their lawn. All you need is to find somebody who has $45 trillion. No big deal. Or I suppose you could change the numbers a little bit to make it a little bit more realistic. I don't want you to use this for evil, though. I want you to only use it for good. And let's talk about what we learned from this example. Other than the fact that this is a $45 trillion tip, in fact, maybe I should have renamed this video, one $45 trillion hack to make money at home. Who knows? I probably would have got a lot more hits that way. But the $45 trillion isn't really the point here, because that's not really realistic for most of our investments. But what is the point? The point is to show what an incredible tool compound interest is. And so if you were looking for the answer to the most important thing in all of investing, the most important lesson, it's understanding compound interest. But don't take it from me, take it from this quote. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. Compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. Now, who do you think might have said that? Who might have spoken about compound interest? And if you follow your investment things, you may be thinking somebody like Warren Buffett, or maybe Peter Lynch, or possibly like a John Bogle, some legend of investments. But you'd be wrong. The answer is Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, I think, was a pretty smart dude. And he happened to know quite a bit about forces in the universe. So if he thinks that compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe, then maybe we should listen. So now that we understand how valuable of a concept compound interest is, and if you didn't believe me, hopefully you believe Albert Einstein, how can we use that in our daily lives to get closer to our financial freedom? Well, there's a couple of different rules that I think will be helpful, and at the end I'll explain why I feel that those rules are so useful. The first rule is the rule of 72. Now, this is a common rule. Some of you may have already heard of it in relation to investing. The rule goes kind of like this. If you take 72 divided by your investment return, so in this case 72 divided by X, where X is equal to your investment return, it equals the years to double. So for example, if you were able to get 10% investment return, and oh, by the way, that's not an incredible amount. That's actually the average of the stock market over the course of its history. So 10% returns, you would get a double in approximately 7.2 years. If you were to use 10.41% interest, then it would be exactly 7 years, or really, really close. Close enough for government work, for sure. So that 7 years is what I use as a doubling amount, assuming that I can get approximately 10% interest. So how do we use that on a daily basis? Let's say that there was something I was looking to buy that was $1,000. I need to consider that if I were to instead invest that amount in something, for example, the stock market or maybe something else, then if I could get 10% returns on that money, then that money would double every 7 years. So you may have also heard that, or sometimes I refer to that as the rule of sevens, just on the assumption that I can get 10%. Every 7 years it's going to double. And those are pretty useful and helpful, but they still require a bit of computation when you're on the spot, trying to figure out exactly how many doubles is that going to be and how many 7 years periods do I want to go out in the course of this computation? So I was discussing this concept with my son a little bit, and he had an incredible idea as he was looking at, and we were both looking at the different numbers as far as compound interest, and he was kind of looking over my shoulder at my spreadsheets. He came up with something that I'll call the 10x rule, and I have to attribute it to my son Bryce. So the 10x rule is as follows. With 10% returns, it takes under 25 years, somewhere between 24 and 25 years, but let's say under 25 years for a 10x return. So in other words, a 10 times return. And the simple way to do that would just be to add a zero. So in the previous example of a $1,000 purchase or investment, trying to decide which I was going to do, if I were to put that $1,000 in after 25 years of 10% returns, it would be like adding a zero, so thus that 1,000 would be 10,000. Using that 10x rule, we can get a little bit closer to figuring out the large numbers associated with compound interest. But I wanted to take it a step further. For that, I came up with the 100x rule. Here's the 100x rule. With 10% returns and annual contributions, it takes under 25 years for a 100x return. So in that example, we have $1,000, but this time, instead of just investing it once and letting it grow 10x, we're going to invest that $1,000 every year for the next 25 years. And at the conclusion of that $1,000 will now be $100,000. So now we're getting into some big numbers, right? If you weren't compelled to give up that $1,000 purchase for a 10x return, maybe you will for a 100x return, assuming that you could put that money in every year. So let's talk about a practical example for this. If you were to buy a cup of Starbucks coffee with tip, probably cost you about $5. $5 a day over the course of a year is $1,825. Did you ever think of that? Well, $1,825 is a significant amount of money, but not as significant as it would be if we apply the 10x or the 100x rule. So if we did that for a year with the 10x rule, that $1,825 would now be $18,250 25 years later. And that's if we only did it for a year. We only stopped drinking coffee for a year, basically. But what if we did it and we decided to forego coffee for the next 25 years? Well, now it would be the 100x rule. So for 25 years, the money that we would have put towards coffee, we're now going to invest that immediately, directly on a monthly basis into, let's say, the stock market, for example. If we can get 10% returns on that money, and oh, by the way, that's quite realistic. Like I said, that's the historical average, and I've actually averaged about 4% better than that. So it's quite possible to get 10% returns. If we could do that, keep shoveling that money in for 25 years, that $1,825 per year now becomes $182,000. Now that's some significant cash. Now to look at the 50-year return on that Starbucks coffee, we're actually going to apply not just the 100x rule, but an additional rule that I came up with, which is the 1000x rule. Who wouldn't like to make 1,000 times the amount of original money that they invest? Well, here's how you do it. The 1000x rule states that with 10% returns and annual contributions, it takes under 50, actually about 48 or so, years for a 1000x return. That's adding 3 zeros to the amount of the investment. So for simple math, I like to use 50 because it's easier. For that same $1,825 worth of coffee, if we forego that coffee for 50 years, continuously shovel that money into investments, purchasing assets that bring us money back, that will be now worth $1,825,000. I could think of a lot of things I could do with $1.8 million. And the most important of all of them would be that could give me financial freedom. No longer would I have to work again, and then you could be free with your time, just like I am, to do whatever it is that you want to do. So let's review the rules that we learned today. There's the rule of 72, pretty commonly known rule, which indicates that 72 divided by your investment return equals the number of years to double. That's a pretty handy rule, but it still takes a little bit of math to figure out what it's going to be worth in the future. Some of the rules that I came up with, actually my son and I came up with, the first one is the 10x rule. If you invest that amount, no more future investments, just that one-time amount, 25 years later at a 10% return, it will be 10x that amount. So add a 0 to the end. The 100x rule was that if you take an investment amount and you invest it every year for 25 years, it'll be worth 100 times that amount. And then the 1000x rule is if you take an investment amount, continue to invest that over the next 50 years, it'll be worth 1,000 times its original amount. Hopefully you're not overwhelmed by the math. Let's talk about how we can actually use this on a daily basis. Whenever you have a purchase that leaves you with the choice of should I buy this or should I forego that purchase and invest this amount, all you need to do is run through one of the rules to figure out what that purchase would then be worth in future dollars. And that's a vital piece of information because it'll let you make an informed decision. No longer are you just guessing what that money would be worth. You can say, I can buy this item, it's $1,000, but I know 25 years from now it's going to be worth $100,000 more if I buy it every year. Or at least $10,000 more after 25 years if it's just one item that I'm considering buying. Having an informed decision lets you make the choice that best fits and aligns with your future goals, right? Because this isn't about me. I'm not trying to make you make choices like me. I'm quite miserly and don't buy very many things. I'm trying to help you make the best choices for you, but making them be informed decisions with a knowledge of what that money could be if you were to invest it and what it could be worth in the future. Here's my challenge for you. In the next week, I want you to try to develop the habit of before you buy something, considering the value of that purchase or the money associated with that purchase, what that could be worth 25 years from now. I want you to try to develop that habit and that routine. In fact, I don't even want you just to try it, I want you to do it.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Thank you, Yoda. In order to achieve different results than you've achieved up till now, if you really want to pursue that financial freedom, you need to begin making informed decisions about your purchases. You may have to unlearn what you've learned about consumerism.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
That's right. You have to unlearn what you have learned. Start making better, more informed decisions. Use the different 10x, 100x, 1000x rules to help you make those informed decisions. And I promise you, you'll be well on your way on the path, on the glide path to financial freedom. I hope you've enjoyed this. If so, I want you to pull the trigger on that like button, drop a bomb on that subscribe button, heck, even shoot a missile at the notifications button so you can continue to learn about all my upcoming videos. Again, if you haven't seen my last video, I encourage you to check it out, and we'll see you on the flight line.